Welcome to the Friday afternoon sex and healing relationship. I think Tammy, you're going to introduce me. I'm sorry, I jumped in.
It's all good. But I'm so happy to have Debbie McRae here. I was saying just before I hit record that I refer often to your previously recorded webinar. So we're grateful for the people that are joining us live, but we love it that other people are seeing your content. Always great content. But you've got some exciting news for us, so please share.
I do. Well, as you know, I'm a licensed counselor and I work out of Mesa, Arizona. I'm also a certified sex addiction therapist. And I've just recently gone out on my own. So I now have my own individual practice. And I'm working with several other counselors who are also in their own practice, continuing to do the work and moving forward in helping those partners who've experienced betrayal trauma heal from that trauma. So I'm really excited. There's lots of fun and exciting things to come. Like I said, my specialty is working with betrayed partners, and I do that currently in an individual and a group setting that's based on the codependence model, which I really love and I'm very passionate about. So like I said, as we were chatting before we started recording, I always bring to this webinar what shows up in my office. And just recently, I keep having clients come in questioning the time frame. How long does it take to finally feel like everything's back to the new normal or back to normal, which is not really going to happen? They just feel like 5 months into it, why am I not feeling better? The other thing I've had recently come up is a partner who's experienced betrayal trauma for the second time because their addict partner had a relapse. And they're questioning, why am I not getting over it this time quicker? You think I would. I've been through this before. I have the skills and the tools. So, like I said, oftentimes I get betrayed partners coming in questioning, why am I not better? How much longer do I have to experience this? How long is this going to take? Well, today we're not going to talk about a specific time frame. Instead, we're going to talk about a timeline, so that you can understand where you're at in that timeline of recovery. Give you an understanding of, okay, this is the work I've done. Here's the work I still need to be doing. And I think it'll be really helpful for those that are questioning whether or not they're moving forward. Maybe you even have a partner. If you're an addict partner, maybe your betrayed partner is stuck and you kind of see where they're at. So let me just lay some foundational things like I typically do. First of all, let's talk about betrayal trauma and what it is. You know, betrayal trauma is the pain and the emotional distress that's experienced by somebody who's been severely deceived by a loved one. And as a result of that, there is a trigger, an avalanche of intense emotional pain. There is anxiety, depression, fear, sadness, shame, so many intense feelings and body responses. In fact, it took me years down the road after my betrayal trauma to realize that my betrayal trauma was just like PTSD. And it is. It has the exact same characteristics of post-traumatic stress disorder. The heartbreak of betrayal trauma is very complicated. It is very layered. And no two people experience betrayal trauma in the same way. So every time I see a client, everybody comes unique into my office or into my group. And I've learned that recovery from betrayal trauma can't be rushed, just like recovery from an addiction cannot be rushed. So if they want a general time frame, I will tell my clients two things. First of all, I'll tell them, well, we tell the addicts it takes 3 to 5 years for them to get their brains rewired and to really be fully into recovery and on that path, and it's solidly on that path. So it may take you 3 to 5 years. Some of the research shows that it takes anywhere between 18 months and 3 years for a betrayed partner to recover. So whatever the time frame, you can see that it is not months or days. It's more like a year and a half to 5 years. And a lot of it is dependent on some things, including the efforts that the betrayed partner makes in their own recovery. That's a really important part. And is the betrayed partner getting the right kind of help? Because I have had clients come into me that have started on that road to recovery and have had really bad experiences with therapists that don't understand recovery in this area. And they come in and we have to do a lot of repair work before we get them back to that place where they're starting to feel like they're moving forward. Okay. So remember that when we first have discovery or disclosure, that the betrayed partner immediately goes into a crisis. So that first timeline piece is, I'm in this crisis point. So this really is the beginning of a recovery experience if you choose it to be. What that means is you're in this middle of this crisis state with all of this emotional turmoil, this acute emotional reaction. Your brain is offline. And typically, the betrayed partner will go into acting out of this emotional state. So they become very reactive. They're having a hard time regulating. They don't feel good. It is life. Life is so overwhelming. I even have some betrayed partners that will go really into logic. They'll start researching and looking and figuring out and trying to map out and really logically think their way through these early stages, this crisis stage in recovery. And sometimes I see them exhaust themselves doing that as well. What happens with the betrayed partner is they'll try to use their coping mechanisms they've used in the past, and this time they're not working. And so the first thing that we need to do is to look at that betrayed partner as being in crisis. And in codependence terms, we look at crisis as anywhere from 1 month to up to a year, even to get somebody out of crisis. And really, we're working on getting them stabilized. So during this time, I'm working with the betrayed partner on helping them feel like they've got their feet on the ground again, that the ground feels a little more stable. And so I have to give them a lot of concrete direction and support. So from the first time they come into my office, I'm teaching them about what betrayal trauma is, what it does with the brain, how it feels in the body, so that you can begin to recognize as a betrayed partner exactly how it's showing up for you. Because knowledge is so important in this process because it's very frightening and very scary when you're having levels of anxiety, for example, that you've never had before, maybe even a panic attack for the very first time in your life, and you have no idea why or how to get out of it. So at this point, I'm trying to teach my betrayed partners when they're in crisis about codependence, about how they're making their best attempts at trying to create a connection that feels safe and secure to them. And maybe in their attempts, they're not doing it very well. So oftentimes you will see a lot of what we call safety seeking. Remember, safety seeking is the behaviors that the betrayed partner goes into when they're questioning and wondering or feeling like their addict partner isn't secure or safe. And so sometimes we get into things like, I'm going to track my partner. It might be I even get angry at my partner to get them to do what I want him or her to do. It could be that I'm become the best detective in the whole world. I may even follow my partner. So I'm really looking for evidence that my addict partner is safe and secure, and I can therefore move towards them. Unfortunately, during the crisis period, a lot of the safety seeking is less than healthy. And so we need to identify when they're in their safety seeking and how it's benefiting them. So we kind of talk about trauma, how it shows up, what you might be doing when you're in crisis. And then I really focus on creating stabilization. My general focus is on three things. So during the crisis period, and anytime you go into a crisis period, you've got to work on, first of all, creating that healthy human connection. So you've got to find healthy people to connect to. For some betrayed partners, that's when they first come into my office. So I'm now seeking out somebody who knows about betrayal trauma, might even have experienced it themselves, can understand, they can get me in contact and connection with groups where I can get support. So that is really, really important. We need other people at this point to help us co-regulate, because at this point in time, my bandwidth, I call it the window of tolerance, how much stress I can take, is very narrow. And that's because I'm in crisis. The second thing we have to do is we've got to start working on getting the betrayed partner back in their body. And I've talked about this a lot. And I typically do that through meditative practices. So I'm teaching the betrayed partners how to get back in their body and out of thinking about the past, the if onlys, and in the future, the what ifs. So we can do that through lots of things, journaling. We can do that through some type of guided imagery. So you can have an app on your phone. We work on breathing exercises. And we even work on maybe some affirmations combined with breathing exercises that bring you back into the present moment. So I'm trying to help educate the betrayed partner in understanding that the only thing that he or she has control over is the present moment. But when we're in crisis, our brain wants us to look in the past, in the future, and sometimes we forget to live in the here and now. So that's a real important part that we focus on in that crisis period. The next thing we work on is the self-care. So this is where we start to get into recovery routine. So with the self-care, we're looking at those four main areas. We're looking at what is the betrayed partner doing to help support him or her physically. So we encourage that they do two things each day in that physical area to support their physical body. So the early days of betrayal trauma, I may have a difficult time sleeping, eating. I may not be exercising any longer because I'm in crisis. So it has to be a very intentional effort. Sometimes betrayed partners even put into place support people who will help them. Maybe remind them to eat, go exercise with them, and that's very important. The next area is spiritual. So we want the betrayed partner to connect with a higher power, something that's bigger than them. I say this is feeding your spirit. So whether it's turning to some type of religious practice, whether it's prayer, or it's turning to gaining knowledge and feeding your spirit that way by maybe understanding more about betrayal trauma, maybe it's journaling, spending time in nature, but really focusing on connecting to either your higher self or a higher power like God for many people. The next area is what we call emotional. I also refer to it as taking care of myself. What do I need? Oftentimes, betrayed partner struggles with the fact that they have to be responsible for meeting their own needs because the addict partner has created so much trauma for them and they're responsible for the hurt and the pain. Betrayed partners often think that they need to be there to help meet every one of the betrayed partner's needs. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So it's really important that you start to focus on, okay, what do I need today? Do I need to spend time resting? Do I need to read a good book? Do I need to go visit a friend? Do I need to go to lunch? What do I need in this moment for myself? And then lastly, it's relationally. When we are in crisis, we want to isolate. My friend would call it, going into your cocoon, right? Because life is so overwhelming. And that's the opposite of what we need to do when we're in the middle of this crisis phase. So it's important that you put together people, and each day you're reaching out to other people, you're doing something relationally. So again, two things every day that you're going to do to create some type of connection. It might be going to a support group. It might be doing a call every day to somebody at the same time. It could be that you are going to lunch 3 days a week with people that are there to support you, but you want to make sure you maintain that connection with people. We need other people to help us co-regulate. So what does that mean to co-regulate? Co-regulate means that I'm outside my window of tolerance. I'm having a difficult time in the here and now, getting back to a place where my brain is connected to the prefrontal front part of my brain. I'm stuck in fight, flight, or freeze, that limbic part, and I need somebody else in this moment to help me feel grounded, to get back connected, get my brain back online. And oftentimes, the quickest way, and the research tells us it is the quickest way, is healthy human connection. So during that crisis period, it's really important that the betrayed partner, first of all, starts using the skills and tools to begin to get regulated. They get the help and the support that they need, and they start to understand how that betrayal trauma is showing up in their body and what actions they're moving into as a result of that. So there's a lot of education around that in the beginning that a betrayed partner needs to understand, but there's also those action items as well. So we can stay stuck there. We can stay in crisis if we choose not to do those types of things. And I have seen women start to do recovery and then they let go of some of those recovery tools and they slip back to crisis. So remember, we can move up and down on this timeline I'm talking about. So as I see betrayed partners healing, the next point on their timeline is an acceptance point. So I'm accepting the fact that I have betrayal trauma. I'm accepting the fact that there's been disclosure or discovery. And so I'm beginning to implement, establish, and follow through on some type of my own recovery plan. So that means that even as a betrayed partner, I have to have my own recovery routine, my own recovery plan. As a result of this recovery plan, you're going to put some different types of boundaries in place for yourself, and especially around safety seeking. So I like to educate and work with my clients on, okay, what's your safety seeking? And I've mentioned this in past webinars, but I like to look at safety seeking on this continuum, right? We've got healthy safety seeking here, we've got unhealthy up here. And so without judgment, we just discuss what is the safety seeking you're doing. And as a reminder, safety seeking is the behavior that the betrayed partner goes into when they're feeling unsafe in this relationship because of their partner's addiction. And so, in order to feel safe, the partner may go into certain behaviors to make sure that their partner is safe enough for them to move towards, or to let them know if they need to stay away. So, like I've said, some of the safety seeking behaviors will create more disconnection and do more damage. So, we have to start analyzing that, and we come up with a plan on how to regulate in that moment. So, the betrayed partner in this point of acceptance has to accept the fact that I do safety seeking, some of it's not healthy, and that I'm making a choice to go down the rabbit hole at times. So, when my clients come in, they tell me I'm back in my safety seeking, I was dysregulated for 3 days. There's no judgment. Rather, we sit and look at it and go, okay, so you did it this way. If you could go back and do it again, or in the future, how are you going to do it differently? And it's really, really helpful because we learn by making mistakes. So we start to learn what works and what doesn't work. You start to understand your triggers, and you come up with ways to regulate emotionally when you're triggered. You don't get sucked down the rabbit hole of your trauma response. And I know that's really hard. And this takes a lot of work in this beginning stage. But even if you're in a trauma response because you've been triggered, and remember, most betrayed partners live with their addict partners who are a constant source of a trigger. So you reach out to people. You find people maybe that are further along in their recovery journey to help you. And I find that the groups are great for this because typically groups have some type of communication established outside of group where they're there to support each other. So if you're having a trauma response, you can turn to somebody who will give you some input and possibly provide you with some ideas on what's worked for them. During this time, the betrayed partner is still focusing on the addict partner and their recovery. So this is where I see the betrayed partners watching to see if their addict partners are doing their recovery work. They're very aware of how often they're going to their therapist. They are feeling better if they see their addict partners doing well. So a lot of their emotional regulation and a lot of their ability to feel grounded is very dependent upon how well the addict partner is doing. So emotional regulation can still be a challenge at times because if the addict partner isn't doing what the betrayed partner thinks they should be doing, then they get easily dysregulated. During this time, the betrayed partner is experiencing a lot of loss and grief. And so they're starting to understand the early stages of that loss and grief and what that's like for them. So, one of the things that they've got to start doing is just recognizing where they're at in that. So the next thing that we need to do is as we're beginning to work through recovery is we start to focus on making sure that you're in weekly or every 2 weeks to your therapist, a qualified therapist, because that's going to help you stay more grounded. And as you get better and as you find your trauma responses decrease, as you feel yourself becoming more stabilized, then you can cut back on that. I do see sometimes that when the betrayed partners start into therapy, they start to feel a little bit better, that sometimes they think they can do it on their own. So they kind of pull back and then they kind of slide back some. So you've got to be very aware of that. Support is so important during this time because you want to get very well established. Hopefully, as you're working through this particular time where I'm accepting the fact that I've got to do betrayal trauma work, I'm establishing it, I'm moving forward, you're now going to get to a point in the timeline where you're working on repair. and even reconnection at some point with the addict partner. So here you're fully focused and committed to doing your own recovery work. So at this point in time, I see the betrayed partners finally go, you know what? I only have control over me. I can only do my own recovery. Whatever they choose to do, I realize I can't control it. It is what it is. While it may sound like it's not very supportive, I see it as a really important place to get. Because the truth is that we have to get to a place where we know that we cannot control an addict, no matter what we do, no matter how much safety seeking we do, how many boundaries we put in place with really, really what we think are really good consequences. We just have to get that place of acceptance. The betrayed partner is now experiencing emotions, and they're not stepping into their emotions, taking over every aspect of their life, their entire mood. They recognize it. Like I've mentioned in the past, I teach my clients when they're having a certain emotion to recognize it, acknowledge it, learn from it, journal about it, understand why it's there, and then do something with it. Another thing that happens is we see that the unhealthy safety seeking starts to diminish, and they step into healthier safety seeking. So communication improves, and understanding of what you need improves. You're able to verbalize that to your addict partner. And if the addict partner is willing to do it with you, then you do well. And even if they're not willing to do it with you, you do well. So you see a lot of stability at this time. You stop seeing the betrayed partner spending so much time donating their time, their energy, and their efforts to the addict partner. And they start spending more time on their own self-care. And I know a lot of betrayed partners really struggle with this self-care piece because they feel like it's very selfish. Some of them were never taught to take care of themselves growing up. And so again, this is where you finally get to that point where you know when you need to take care of yourself and you willingly do it. So that's really important. You've got your well-established support system by now. And like I said, you've acknowledged the grief and the loss in that earlier spot on your timeline, but now you're going deeper. You're digging deeper. So you might be doing work with your therapist or in a group on a grief and loss timeline, which is really awesome because you can go back and you can timeline out everything you experienced, and even talking about it and doing some kind of artwork around it. Some people do it in a trauma egg form. I like to do it and give my clients a little bit of creative license. So I give some ideas and suggestions, and then they present that and share that. And we use that later on in their recovery when we work on the post-traumatic growth. During this time, I see the betrayed partners establishing healthier boundaries. They're learning about boundaries. They're figuring out how to verbalize those boundaries so that it creates more connection. And for a lot of them, this is a really hard work. So there's a lot of focus on that and understanding what their rights are as a betrayed partner in a relationship. So they have to identify their relational needs, and then they have to put boundaries into place around that. And then they've got to implement the boundaries, and then they figure out how to hold to those boundaries, even when it's difficult. I call it sitting in the discomfort of setting the boundaries and holding to it. Also, at this point in time, as they're moving along into this repair and reconnection phase, the betrayed partner now wants to start working with the addict partner in repairing the relationship. So typically at this point, we have done, if they're going to do a therapeutic formal disclosure, that's done, right? We've got boundaries established. I've now kind of worked through my grief and my loss. So I'm feeling more understanding of what I've experienced and the acceptance that comes along with that. And now I'm ready to move into the hard work with my addict partner. So we start having couples see somebody who understands betrayal, trauma, and addiction, and starting to work on that repair to the attachment. And so this is a really busy time. So you can see this doesn't just happen in a week or two. This part of recovery can take a year and a half easily, because along the way, we want it to integrate, meaning it becomes a part of your everyday life. It becomes that routine. We talk about the healing journey, and this is part of it, but it also has to become part of everyday life as well. Okay? Then the last point on the timeline I'm going to talk about is what I call the growth point. So this is where not only are we integrating recovery work into your life on a daily basis, but you're now getting to a point of acceptance about the experience. You're getting to a point of being able to let go. So for some of the betrayed partners, it's they're learning to let go of their own shame around this experience, maybe that they felt like they caused it or they somehow contributed to their partner's addiction. They also have to get to a place of acceptance. They can't control it and they can't cure it. And that their addict partner may not choose to get better. So there's a lot of work that can happen around that. During this time, you see in the growth period that now the betrayed partners have fewer triggers and fewer trauma responses. In fact, trauma responses are not the rule now, they're more of the exception. So when I do have a trauma response, I'm quick to understand it. I know what I need to do. And so I can move out of it quickly. Sometimes they can move out of it by kind of going into their thinking and going into self-compassion, and they've got a little routine down and it pulls them out of it very, very quickly. Another thing that happens during this acceptance phase is that the betrayed partner realizes that, things are going to be different. My life isn't turning out the way that I want it to. I don't know how it's going to turn out yet, but I can look ahead to the future with hope and with confidence that I'm going to be okay and that someday we're going to find that new normal and it's a work in progress. And there's no timeline, there's no time limit to it. So they continue their work with the addict partner in repairing the relationship. They begin to reintegrate healthy sexuality into their relationship. They will see the relationship is improving. And this is when I have clients come to me and say, I hate the fact that we went through this addiction and I had to go through betrayal trauma, but it's taken us to a place in our relationship where we've never been before. There's more openness, authenticity, there is more connection. We are communicating in ways we never have before. And so in that moment, they're able to see that post-traumatic growth we talk about. And so I love my clients who get to this point to focus on what have you learned? Where in your life do you see that you've actually benefited from this awful, terrible, devastating experience? And they can start to identify that. You also see that the betrayed partner has the ability to let go of things. So some people will do some forgiveness work. Some people do more of that, just letting it go, like that just knowing that you can't control anything. And so then this experience no longer controls their lives. And I see them stepping more into gratitude and into focusing on not the problem so much and all the betrayal, but how to do things differently moving forward so that they can have a healthier, more connected experience with their partner. Now, oftentimes there are clients that at this point, they realize that the relationship isn't going to work. And so unfortunately, that's a decision that has to be made. And it's very difficult. The reason we like to get them to this point before they make that decision is because you've got the skills, the tools, you're more grounded. And so when you're making this decision, you're not making it while you're operating the majority of the time out of that limbic part of your brain. So we have to be reconnected to prefrontal cortex where there's logic, reasoning, emotional regulation. So sometimes we do have to come to that decision as to, do I stay or do I go? And if you choose to step out of the relationship and move forward, then there's work to be done around that and start creating for you the ability to move out of the relationship and create your own new life with healthy boundaries and healthy recovery skills and tools that you're continuing to use. So I'm hoping that this is helpful for you because I, as a therapist, I'm looking at these different points on the timeline and the betrayed partners as they recover. It gives me a really good indication of where we're at. Again, it's hard to tell you that it's going to take 1 year for you or 6 months for you or 3 years for you, but rather it's really easy to say, here's where you're at in your recovery. And if you choose to do recovery with full intention, with the help of people supporting you, then your recovery is going to move faster and it is going to be much easier. So anyway, that's my thoughts for today. Hope that's
Great
helpful.
stuff. I've got a whole bunch of stuff written down and highlighted, and we've got some questions. But even starting at the back end of it, where you said, not every relationship works out, but if you've done the work, and I had someone that reached out this week, and the relationship is not continuing, but the addict was going, but I want to do this with integrity and with kindness, and I was like, that's huge growth that for both of you, and their parents and grandparents, I mean, whatever. So there's always other people involved. It isn't just about you, but they're doing it intentionally, but they've done the work to know that this is time. It's time to separate. But I thought that was such a gift of being able to do the work. The experience does not control. Yeah, like I love it when I see partners that whatever the addict's doing or not doing, it isn't the sole focus of their world. It isn't rocking them, on the waves, every single time that, they're going like, you're going to do whatever you're going to do. I've got my support. I've got my connections. And another person shared this week that, I mean, I always say to the betrayed partners, this is the club you didn't want to join, but I had multiple people that, stepped up and go, but I have this support and I'm more resilient. I'm stronger than I thought I was. So it, it isn't what you ever want to start out shooting for, but on the other side of it, the gifts of recovery work, whichever way you're coming from, really, it really can be transformative. You said the partner donating their time, and I thought, oh my gosh, if a partner paid attention to that and went, I'm giving away my time to that person who's betrayed me, like it stopped me in my tracks when somebody told me early in recovery about a resentment, and it was, in my opinion, a completely legitimate resentment, but they said, you're letting that person live rent free in your head. And I was incensed, I don't want to give them anything. But it made me do the work, so that I didn't hang on to that. So it was the, awakening, from that standpoint. You cannot control the addict. You said that, but I also have addicts that want to control the partner. Like, how do I make them do whatever, or, get them, it's usually, how do I get them over this? Cause like, I'm tired of that. So you sharing the timeline, and it's realistic, the thing is, it isn't like, oh, at 18 months or at 2 years or at 5 years, the switch magically flips. You will see progress. So the path is getting less rocky. It's, it's smoothing out along the way, but until it becomes part of who you are, it still is a journey, and unfortunately for addicts, if they quit, I said, addicts are the only ones that go, this worked really well for me, so I'm going to quit doing it. And then they're shocked that they've, relapsed. And but if we're intentional, just for today, of doing the work that we need to do, we get to live a really good life, like you were sharing with your couples, that, they really are transformed and have a better relationship than they could have ever even imagined, before they did the work. So great stuff. I really like the visual of the timeline too, of like, it isn't just, it's not steps. You do this and then this and this, and then poof, you're all better. It's like, it's gradual. And, if you quit doing the things that are working, you can slide around on that. Or if something happens, like you said, even the less bandwidth, you've got, lots of challenges outside of your primary relationship, you have less bandwidth. So something could be more triggering, but, understanding that, there's a plan. If you have a plan for how to handle those triggers, then they're, the little blips. I'll share one more thing and then we'll get to questions. But one of the meditation things that I actually do use, somebody said, when something triggers you, let it be like a babbling brook, and you just visualize it running right on through. So it's there and it's real, but it's going to continue to flow. And that has helped me to not try to, you can't hang on to a babbling brook, and so to let that go, and just, and it's kind of soothing to have a water image, of having it just keep on moving, that was helpful for me. Okay. Questions. We have questions. I am sober for over 2 years of porn use and all the lies and deceit that come with those behaviors and choices of mine, and I regularly attend recovery groups. We are currently 4 months into an in-house separation, and my wife has filed for divorce for the third time in the last 2 years. In her mind, she told me that her heart can't let me go, but her body is telling me to run, and she might not want a divorce anymore. I am trying to show up for her and listen when she says this. I would like your thoughts on how I can address this with her and how the multiple divorce filings have caused me to think that a divorce may be necessary and the negative impact that it would has had on me as well. I don't know if it is healthy to be in a relationship where there is divorce filed, when I have done something egregious in her mind and then she rethinks it after a few months. I do want to be married to her. I am scared to talk to her about this because I was the perpetrator in all of this, and bringing up any topic may land as I don't think that one's so we'll just go with, and it may not land well, and I want to shift the behavior or the language, because the behavior was was abusive, and you are the addict. Perpetrator goes to the sex offender language. So if you are legitimately a legal defined sex offender, and Dr. Rob just talked about this recently, then perpetrators probably fine. But yes, your behavior was the problem, for this particular thing. But so I'm caveating that, and then I'm turning it over to you, Debbie, for all of the rest of that.
Yeah. Well, this is a very rich question with lots of layers. So one of the things that I first want to talk about is the fact that you've been sober for 2 years. I want you to know that's really good. 2 years of sobriety. I'm hoping that you're doing recovery work along that way in order to get to that 2 years. I'm going to assume that you have. And you've got a couple of things going on here. You've got a betrayed partner who is not regulated. And it's pretty obvious. So what happens with trauma, remember, is not only am I experiencing it in my brain, in that limbic part, I'm in fight, flight, or freeze when it's occurring, but I'm also having these body sensations. So it feels very intense and overwhelming and even painful, because there's areas of our brain that when it starts firing, it feels like pain in our body. And so what I'm hearing you say about your wife is that right here, she can think, when she's connected to prefrontal, I want to stay in this relationship, but because she's not done all the work on her own trauma, her body goes into that trauma. She's still feeling those sensations. That's what doesn't feel good to her, is the fact that my body is reacting in such a way that I don't know that I can feel like this for the rest of my life. And somehow, because it's related to you, I need to get away from you. And so it sounds like it's a cycle that's repeating again and again and again. Sounds like neither one of you really want divorce as your option. So the question is how can you encourage your betrayed partner to get whatever support or help she needs with her own betrayal trauma? And one of the things that needs to be worked on in this timeline, and that is at some point, I have to work with the betrayed partner on working through those body sensations and working through how the trauma has affected their brain and their body. So we've got to do work from the top down and the bottom up. And it sounds to me like when your wife has all of these overwhelming feelings and sensations in her body, that's when she goes into, my best option is to divorce. I've got to get away from you. Then when she gets more regulated, all of a sudden she realizes, oh, maybe that's not what I want. So you're up and down and up and down. I imagine for you as the recovering addict, that's very difficult in your own recovery because you never know where you're at in this relationship. And I know it's difficult for your betrayed partner as well. So I don't know if you guys have gone in and done any couples counseling together yet. I don't know her willingness to do her own therapy or where she's at on that. I would really encourage her. I would have a lot of empathy with her. I would validate the fact that she's having those emotions and the intensity of those. I think if I were in your shoes, one of the things I would say to her is that you recognize that it's very painful and that it's due to your behaviors, and letting her know that you want to stay connected with her, you want the relationship to work, you're willing to support her. and making sure that somehow she feels supported in the moment. When she's regulated and grounded, that's when you go back and you maybe recommend, hey, can we go in and see somebody? Can we go in and do our own couples work? Can I figure out how to better support you? Can we figure out how to help you stay out of this? And even encourage her into getting into her own therapist that she's working on. Because, like I said, there's so many layers, not only to your situation, but also to recovery, especially with betrayal. Now, the other thing is, you mentioned that you guys are doing a 4-month in-house separation. And when I work with clients and they're doing some kind of a separation, whether it's out of the house or in the house, we have structure around that. And part of that structure is that each partner is doing their own recovery work. And we clearly outline what the work is they're doing while we're separated. So that's really important that you recognize the fact that even though you're separated, it doesn't mean you stop doing recovery work because you're no longer in the middle of, right, having contact and we're not in crisis like we were. We're taking that time away not only to regulate, but start doing and working on our own recovery. So I think for you too, you have to decide at some point in working with your own therapist is how many times can you hear, your partner saying they're going to divorce you, because that doesn't feel safe. That doesn't feel like very secure as far as the relationship goes. And what does that do to your own recovery? So you have to look at that and maybe even make the hard decision that if your partner is choosing not to do their healing and somehow it's affecting you negatively in your own recovery, that you don't have the bandwidth or the ability, the capacity, to manage this situation, that maybe separating or divorce is the best option, although it's not the one you want. I'm all for keeping relationships together and doing the repair. However, it takes two people. Both parties have to have the willingness, and they also have to have, the capacity, meaning they're going to learn the skills and tools to reestablish connection, repair connection. And so the key is it takes two people. For you too, working through that shame of somehow, because of your addiction, right, you've created this and caused this in her. There's work to be done there. And so I encourage you to do that as well. So if she's not willing to go to couples counseling with you, then get into your therapist and start working on that. Create some structure around the separation. So maybe we have an understanding of that. And then watch and see how it goes. And you might have to work in a therapist's office on choosing what your next step is.
Yeah, I was thinking when you can't have a difficult conversation, I mean, that's part of a relationship is you have the difficult conversations and not in the heat of the moment, but to have it be, I'm afraid to talk to you about this. But this is really important. Can we have a difficult conversation? Whatever it is, the language you use. I really do think get professional help to support this. I posted in I refer to previously recorded webinars all the time, including lots of Debbie's, but Gavin Sharp did a great webinar on why addicts need healthy boundaries, why we all need healthy boundaries, and having it be that abusive, and I say abusive with, because it is, it's a dart, if I'm going to divorce you or I'm filing for, if she has legitimately filed, to constantly get that, it has to be very difficult for you. I love what Debbie talked about is have the plan of what are you looking, what is the plan for? How do you reconcile, what are you working towards each of you so that, you're re-examining this at 3 months, at 6 months, at whatever, so that you see a plan for, because otherwise you're just living in limbo, but the other thing I was thinking of, if she, rather than taking the action of filing, if she's in the moment dysregulated, her calling up her support people, her scheduling with her therapist and going, I feel like I need to go file for divorce again. Say that to your friends and then go, okay, what's the reality? Do I really? And maybe you do, but otherwise, like that's a terrible roller coaster to be on for both of you. Like, that's just difficult. So I'm sorry. Okay. So the next one is, while I understand that addicts slip, continue to lie, progress instead of perfection. My last betrayal was 2 weeks ago and I can't seem to get through it. I've been intentionally detaching because I'm scared to get close again. And I'm thinking to wait until disclosure to speak to him again. Is my detachment hurting our relation? Is my detachment justified?
Okay,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's difficult.
Yeah.
I do believe you need to create safety for yourself. And I think
Hmm.
that detachment that you're talking about is part of that process. I do like to put words with it though, because we can detach and pull away from somebody and not say that's what we're doing. Or we can verbalize it by saying, I need to step away from you in the relationship right now to work and focus on my own healing and getting regulated myself and being near you at this point because of a recent slip, because I still don't have full disclosure, is where I need to go now so I can focus on my own recovery journey. You're right to be scared that getting close again, right? That, you run the risk of being hurt like this again, and it's taking you back into your trauma again and again and again. And, I like to call that trauma repetition just because I'm repeating the same thing over and over again. It's taking me back into the same trauma. And so we don't want that to happen because I find that the more I go into my trauma, the harder it is to get out of it. It's almost like the pit gets deeper and deeper and deeper each time I go into it. So I think that that is really a wise thing to do. Sit down with yourself, or if you need help, get your support people, your therapist, and figure out what does that look like. I don't know how far away disclosure is. Does that mean we do an in-house separation, out-of-house separation? Does that just mean that we live in the same home, but we don't have any relationship recovery talk? So be very clear on what that framework looks like and come at it from that point of creating safety for yourself and then taking that space to focus on yourself. I guess we could call that loving detachment. It's the fact that I'm going to step away, letting you know what I'm doing, because I run the risk of, if I stay connected to you in this moment and I'm in so much pain, I can say and do things that will actually damage the relationship. So there are times where we need to kind of step away, right? With great boundaries around that, with an understanding around that. And I see that as a healthy way to step back and to create that space for healing.
And I want to tag on with is my detachment hurting our relationship? No, his addictive behaviors, his lying, his behaviors have hurt the relationship. You, healthy boundaries for you to take care of you, because he's not able to step in and take care of you in the relationship yet. Hopefully, if he actually does the formal therapeutic disclosure and is truthful, that there's a path forward, with that. But no, you need to take care of you, because you are the only one that can take care of you. But I love that you talk about, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to use my words with it. That's, yeah, because just the silent treatment then, and it's not fair, but then it's like, oh, she's such a, what, yeah, because she won't even talk to me. Well, I'm not going to talk to you right now, and I'm going to step away from, because then there's words to that. So
Yeah, let me add on to that too. And that
please.
is, if we pull away from a partner without putting words to it and letting them know what we're doing, what that does is it can create that abandonment rejection trauma. And remember, when somebody is in an addiction, it's an attachment intimacy disorder. So that means that it's going to set even the addict partner up for more distress, right? Because they're just still learning how to manage their emotions, and they can do the same thing to the betrayed partner. So we've got to put words to it so that our partner understands what we're doing, because we don't want to further disrupt the attachment. So just my last thoughts.
No, that was great. Next question. How do you regulate your safety seeking when your partner is still acting out, or maybe, and you don't want to be deceived anymore? I have a very hard time not falling into the rabbit hole, but if he's acting out, even though I can't stop it, I want to know.
Okay, the bottom line is you will not know from minute to minute, day to day. My attitude is that eventually you'll know, right? It'll come back around. And so maybe that can help you step out of it. I don't know if you're doing a formal therapeutic disclosure down the road or not. But first of all, don't judge yourself if you're going to safety seeking. But instead, I want you to look at what you're doing and ask yourself, is this helping me feel safer so that I can move towards my partner, or am I getting more dysregulated when I do this? The example would be my client who has gone through the bank records 100 times, but when she's triggered, she goes back to the bank account and starts looking through it again. And she's getting more and more dysregulated. Her addict partner walks in from work and bah, she just goes off on him. So your safety seeking can be healthy too. So what are some healthy safety seeking that you can do if you suspect that he might be acting out? One of the things that I work with my betrayed partners on is, lots of times your intuition is a very powerful tool, and learning how to trust your intuition again. So that if you feel intuitively that they're acting out and they're not safe, then you follow that intuition and you put some safety boundaries in place. So look at your safety seeking. I would encourage you to put the continuum out there and do healthy safety seeking, unhealthy safety seeking. Put the safety seeking in you're doing currently. If it's more on the unhealthy, then let's see, what can we do that's healthier? For example, is your partner willing to do a check-in every night, a really brief check-in? Is your partner willing to maybe go meet in a counselor's office, to establish, some safety around this, especially if they are acting out, do they need to report it? Do they need to do some type of a relapse prevention sheet? Do they need to disclose it within 12 hours? So that could be another way to have a very hard conversation with help. But the bottom line is, we can't always know, and it can make us crazy trying to figure it all out because the brain wants to take all the puzzle pieces and get that puzzle put together. And so we can really go down the rabbit hole, like I said, and you've said. And so we have to stop and go, okay, is this helping me or is this hurting me? If it's hurting you, then you're going to have to get out of your thinking, turn to somebody, do your recovery skills and tools, whatever that means, whether it means I'm going to go breathe, that means I'm going to go do some tapping, to get my body out of this trauma response. I'm going to go journal and get it all out. But it might be that you have to choose to do something else to help you regulate.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple people this week that the partners were literally like they wanted to bubble wrap the situation to make sure that there were no triggers for their addict. And I was like, you can never make the world safe enough, and your entire focus is on him and his addiction and trying to create a false safety, because trust me, an addict can still figure out how to do things around that. So from my standpoint, it's like, you said you want to know, it's bad, he's lied, like at some point you do know that there's stuff out there. You finding it, he may or may not even admit to it. So at the end of the day, you having more knowledge, but like Debbie said, at what cost? And if it's at the cost of you, I go back to what you shared. You're donating your time to this. And like, I bet your time could be way better spent doing some good self-care, connecting with people that deserve your time in a good way. So, okay, next question. My SA is going on a day outing with friends tomorrow, and he has been in a decent recovery. I don't want to go down a rabbit trail about worrying about what he is doing while he is gone. How do I ask him to keep me safe while gone and I keep my mental space clear? I'm expecting the worst, but if he agrees to whatever I ask to keep me safe during this time, then that will give me a clue as to where he is in his recovery, and how I deal with this will tell me where I'm at as well. So what are your thoughts on that?
My thought is use the talking boundary. So I'm going to talk you through that again, because this is a great way to take it to your partner. Again, you want to approach him when you're both well fed, well rested, and make sure you're grounded, meaning I'm connected to prefrontal cortex. I've got logic, reasoning, emotional regulation. Okay. Then prior to going and talking to your partner about this day outing, you've got to get clarity on what's going on for you. So the talking boundary is, first of all, number one, you share the data with your partner. So this is what I see, what I hear, right? When I heard you tell me you're going on this day outing with your friends, it's very factual. It is, we are not coming to any kind of a conclusion, or it's not an opinion. It is just facts. The second step of the boundary is you're going to share them with your partner. When you heard that he was going on a day outing, where did that take you? What stories did you start going into? What do you think about that? So here's where my brain is going. Here's what my mind is telling me. That way you can share so many things with him about what's going on for you regarding this day trip. Then number three, the third step is to share when you're got that data and you're in that story. What is that making you feel? What's the emotions coming up for you? I imagine it would be fear, it would be worry. It's going to be some pretty distressing emotions. Then the fourth step of the boundary is I'm going to share with you what I need. So I'm going to make a vulnerable request or I'm going to put a safety boundary in place. So it would sound like, would you be willing while you're gone to just text me, when you get there or when you're leaving, or, maybe you can come up with certain points of the day. Would you be willing to call me and check in? So figure out what do you need for safety that feels like it's doable, that it feels like it's a healthy thing to ask, that's going to create more safety for you. And I would also let your partner know that you're doing this to create safety, to maintain this connection between the two of you. Because when you feel unsafe, you as a betrayed partner are going to pull away. So sit down, go through this talking boundary with your partner. And then after you've shared, here's what I need for safety. Would you be willing to do it? Then you've got to sit in the hard conversation and come up with a plan. I want you to know you're not alone in this. I've got a lot of partners who come in and we spend an entire session when they've got their addict partner going out of town and we're trying to figure out, okay, what do you need for safety? How can we verbalize and put this into in a boundary, And I've even had clients come in and their addict partners put together a safety plan. So you might even ask him to do that for you. That might be your request. Would you be willing to put together a safety plan and let me know what you're going to do so I can feel safe having you gone with your friends tomorrow? See what they come up with, And if they don't come up with anything, ask them if they're open to you giving them some ideas.
And I hope you plan some self-care for you tomorrow, like so that you are not focused on worrying about him. Don't let him dominate your thoughts. What can you do for you so that you can have a joyful day regardless of what he's doing? Okay, a last question. We are 2 years from D-Day and lots of trickle disclosure. I am still deeply scared to go through a disclosure process. How do I try to stay regulated during post-disclosure? How can the addict support? How can the addict support as well?
Okay, well, that's a lot in that question. It
Mhm.
is a process. I'm going to tell you it's very much a process. I think I've also done a webinar on disclosure. You might want to go back and watch that as well. But it's hard to have all those trickle down disclosures. And it almost sets you up to be even more sensitive to what you're about to hear. And it is a process. There's preparation that has to take place before you can get to disclosure. I work with betrayed partners anywhere from 2 to 3 months in preparing for disclosure. It's more like 3 months. By the time we work on, first of all, 3 different phases. First of all, we talk about what were those unhealthy disclosures and what is a healthy, formal, therapeutic disclosure like. So we talk about that. The next thing I really focus on is what is your self-care you're going to do leading up to disclosure. We talk about during disclosure and even what if this comes up, we come up with how we're going to handle it, how we're going to manage it. And then they have to have a plan. Once they leave the office and they move forward, I know what their plan is. We go over it before they even walk out the door. Okay, you're going to go here. You're meeting up with friends. You guys are going to have dinner. You're going to go stay here tonight. You guys are in separate places. You don't drive to therapeutic disclosure together. And so you've got to create that safety. And then I have a lot of betrayed partners that even after disclosure, they have a little bit of a hard time regulating. So you need people there to support you. You need to get back in to see your therapist right away. So it is a well orchestrated, well planned out process. So I'm hoping that you can find somebody who's really good at therapeutic formal disclosures and that they can kind of provide for you the same kind of a format so that you can go through this. It is hard, but by the time you get through it and we start working on the healing from that, my partners, I would say 99% of the time, come back at some point saying they're so grateful they got to go through that disclosure. And even though it was hard, now they know. So the last thing you asked is how can the addict support as well? I think the addict can support you by being willing to do the disclosure, working with a qualified therapist, putting a lot of time, thought, and energy into their own narrative where they're sharing all the details of their addiction and not just doing it the weekend before. So, and whatever you need, they're willing to provide safety for you.
I was thinking the same thing with the addict, and don't leave off that one thing that you think, if I tell her that, she's going to leave me. Don't do it. It's, be complete. So, but yeah, I'm with you. But I hope you heard, this is not a do-it-yourself job. You've already been through the trickle through. Get the support. It's so worth it to have the qualified help. This is tough stuff. I've shared, Dr. Rob does a peer case consultation group for professionals every week, professionals from all over the world that do this work. What's the number one topic? Formal therapeutic disclosure. So even for the professionals, these are challenging cases. So this is not something you want to do by yourself. You do want somebody who knows how to handle this. But yeah, the addict doing their part is how they support you. They can't make, oh, it's going to be okay. No, it's, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be truthful. I'm going to have the facts, and I'm willing to do this part. So Debbie, thank you again.
You're
So
welcome.
if you joined us late, Debbie has gone to a new place. She's out on her own. She's left the previous employment and has her own practice. I have her updated bio is on our website. Her previously recorded, we've referred to a few of those, are also on Seeking Integrity. You'll find all that and lots more. So thank you. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
You're so welcome. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everybody.